I call it my beautiful disaster because it was lonely and it wasn't fun, but it made me get real about what mattered to me. And as I mentioned, I miss being on a team. I miss being needed. I miss being the man. And I knew that I wanted to do that, but if I was going to do that again, I needed to do things differently.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. I'm excited to bring to you today my conversation with Mr. Ray Hayles. He's the co-owner at Walker Lumber and Supply in Nashville, Tennessee. For the past several years, a friend of mine, who was one of the first guests on this show way back, I believe it's episode 3, was Mr. Dave Reichert, who owns Davis Hawn Lumber Company, south side of Dallas. And he said, you got to meet this guy, Ray. He's really powerful. You guys would hit it off. He must have told me that 5 or 6 times over the course of 3 years. Finally connected when I saw Ray and his brother-in-law and some of his team members present their story at the LBM Strategies Conference in Charlotte back in October of 23. And I will just tell you, I was both challenged and inspired to do more. And there were multiple times where I was emotional. He had me kind of crying in the back of the room with the story and what they've been able to accomplish and the passion behind their mission. So after that, kind of regrouped, and Ray and I met, and you were going to hear some elements of that story, and we're going to go much deeper into that. All I can tell you right now is you're in for a treat. Ray's a very thoughtful guy. He's very motivational, and he's really smart. I believe he can help you become a better manager, leader, and, dare I say, person. So Ray went to SMU, Southern Methodist University, to play football. He got out, took over the family business, and just led that to some astonishing growth, and then sold it and realized that the thing that he always wanted in life, well, he got it. And it didn't bring happiness. So he doubled down to really find what would resonate with him and help him find a path and a mission for the rest of his life that he is on now. So I do not want to give away too much. So we will start the episode. All I can say is thank you for listening. Please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Ray Hayles, co-owner at Walker Lumber and Supply. Mr. Ray Hayles, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bradley. Glad to be here.
We're going to get this thing off the rails right now because third time's a charm. I remembered to hit record here. We are live here together, which is, I love doing podcasts in person. And I think this was special because we're here at the LBM Strategies Conference. You and your team were on stage to talk about your journey at Walker Lumber in Nashville. And there's so many things that are worth diving into. But before we get too far here, take me back. Where were you geographically? 12 years old. Maybe tell us a little bit about your family and like, what were you passionate about then?
Van Halen. I'm joking. All right. So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and had a great family and one sister, great mom and dad. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. My parents were very committed to our family and made a lot of sacrifices so that my sister and myself could go to really good schools. We went to, I went to an all-boys school. My sister went to an all-girls school, college preparatory school, and that laid a great foundation for my life. But so I was in Memphis, Tennessee, 12 years old, and was really into sports. That was my jam back then.
Got it. Which one? Or all of them?
Well, I pretty much played anything.
Okay.
At that age, I was into everything. But as I got older, mainly football and track.
Okay. And you ended up going to Southern Methodist University in Texas. How did that happen?
So originally I was recruited to play football.
Okay.
At SMU. It was a year after the death penalty. They were looking for people that were average athletes and could pass the ACT. And so they weren't looking for stellar athletes. So I got a call and went to visit. And it's a great story, Bradley, because I was getting recruited by Vanderbilt and Ole Miss and Air Force Academy. Those were kind of the ones in Arkansas. So I went to visit SMU, and we knew nothing about SMU. And my dad wanted me to go to the Air Force Academy, and if you know me, that just did not match. Because,
I don't know you that well, but it doesn't seem initially like a fit.
And I didn't want to stay in Tennessee, and so I figured, well, why not just go visit SMU? And so I went to SMU, and I distinctly remember thinking this is the school for me. About 30 seconds after I got to campus, I'd never seen so many good-looking girls before in my whole life. And,
Great spot in the
they
city,
had more
too.
girls than guys. So I thought, man, maybe there's a chance for me. So I came back and I told my dad, I'm going to SMU. And he was like, why? And I said, the girls, man.
I'm sure he appreciated the candor.
You got to be real, man.
What position did you play?
I was pretty fast. I ran a 4.45 40.
Dang.
And I was
That's
running
real
back
fast.
in high school, but I was
Okay.
recruited as a receiver.
Okay. All right. So
I would have never played.
I will not drive this podcast into a ditch, but at some point, some of the lessons about culture and leadership, about coming into that once historic program at such a unique time after the death penalty had to be just fascinating.
Yeah, I ended up not playing football at SMU. I had to have a knee and shoulder surgery, but that's what got me there.
Yeah. No, once you're in, you kind of talked about this story, and maybe you can kind of share your entrepreneurial journey, but you described kind of your work ethic and your mindset earlier in life, post SMU. Said you kind of put your head down, bulldoze through it, get more work on top of that, make more money, and then you kind of start that cycle all over again. And that absolutely resonated with me. And then you said something that I also said, I don't talk to you more about this. I still struggle with this, but didn't know how to slow down. Mm-hmm. You do seem to me like someone who naturally revs at a higher RPM. How have you been able to learn how to slow down?
Well, I think that stems back from I was a really good athlete in high school, and I worked really hard. And I knew that from a young age, even starting my first business when I was 12 years old, cutting yards, I cut every yard in the neighborhood that would allow me to, making $25 a yard. That's kind of where I got my work ethic and my taste of entrepreneurialism. And I played sports, and I always was super, super competitive. And I still love competing. And a lot of people are just natural, but I was very good athlete, but also worked very hard. And that's just kind of been with me my whole life. You know, when I went to SMU for the first time in my life, I was surrounded not only by good-looking women, but a lot of wealth that I had not been accustomed to. As I mentioned to you, my family was middle class. My dad and mom sacrificed a lot. My dad worked extremely hard so that we could have things. And so when I went to SMU and was around wealth really for my first time in my life at high levels, I thought, man, I want some of this. And either you're born into it or you got to work for it or you get lucky. And I wasn't born into it and was never about luck. And so I just kind of put my head down and started working my way through life. But Bradley, being honest, one of my main goals is what you probably experienced and I experienced is when you grow up and you don't have a lot and then you ultimately get married and have kids, you want your kids and your wife to have more than you did. And so that was really my goal. And I like working. Honestly, I enjoy working. And so we can get into whatever you want to get into a little bit later, but like it's hard for me to put boundaries, and I have struggled with that and in my career. And I had a successful exit from a company. And the one thing I can tell you after that is I really missed being on a team. And I knew that if I ever did it again, that I wanted to do it differently than I had done before.
Yeah. Tell us just briefly, maybe about that manufacturer's rep company that you started. You grew what, 10x or more?
Yeah. So long and short, my dad started that company. I went to work for my dad in 1996, worked for a few years, had the opportunity to open a new division in Texas. I was young, newly married. My wife is from Texas, and so it gave us an opportunity to go be near her family. So I did that, worked with my dad until 2003. I was still working with my dad, but my mom died unexpectedly that year, and my dad was kind of done. He had worked his whole life and gotten my sister and I through college. And when my mom passed away, it just kind of took the wind out of his sail. And he came to me one day and he said, "Hey, you want to buy this business or do you want me to sell it?" And he said, if you want to buy it, I'm going to get a business consultant and we'll get it valued and I'll sell it to you what the business consultant says it's worth. But here's what I will do. I'll be the bank and I'll self-finance it and you don't have anything to worry about. So I bought the business from my father.
How old were you at this time?
That was 2002. So I would have been 32 years old.
Okay. All right. Young, aggressive, ambitious.
Right. So a year later, rolled another company into that gave us about an annual revenue of about $8 million. And when I sold in 2012, we were doing $55 million a year in annual revenue. So it was a tremendous ramp up. And I had a very nice financial exit at that point.
So that's the end of the story. You get done. You're like, this is it. I wanted money. I had money. Here it is. And you just rode off in the sunset. That is not what happened.
So, well, it's funny. I told you this earlier, but it was kind of like the dog chasing the mail truck.
I wrote the greyhound chasing the rabbit when you were on the stage and you get it. And you're like,
the dog finally catches the mail truck and he kind of looks at the mail truck and goes, "Well, what do I do now?" And so that was kind of a similar experience to what I experienced. I didn't have money. I thought I always wanted money. I knew that I wanted my kids to live in a nice neighborhood and go to nice schools. And I didn't want my wife to work. I wanted her to be a mom. And that's what she wanted. And she is awesome at that, by the way. And so I just worked really, that was kind of, again, put my head down, made things happen, made sacrifices. But about 8 years into that, I sold roughly 10 years after I bought it from my father. But about 8 years into it, I remember just telling my wife, it's like, "Hey, this ain't working for me. I'm like burnt out of my mind." And my wife, with the wisdom of a wife, says, "You need to slow down." And that's what I did need to do, Bradley. I just didn't know how to do it. I knew that people depended on me and I liked being depended on. And so I liked having that role where people could count on me. And it led to my success, a lot of my success, the hard work, following through, taking care of things, and having a good reputation. And so I knew I needed to slow down. I didn't know how to do it. And so about 2 years later, I was at the end of my rope and had an opportunity to sell, and I did. And thought, like I shared with you earlier, that, man, like this is what I've always looked forward to. I didn't know what my plan was, but I had free time. And so I went out west and went fly fishing a couple times, played some golf, went hunting. And then I soon realized that all my friends were working and they couldn't go hang with me just because I didn't have anything to do.
Your buddies are busy.
Yeah. And so really that kind of led into a dark period of my life, which lasted about 3 years. You probably know this. A lot of people know this, but private equity guys and family offices often will buy businesses for their portfolios, and they know how to buy businesses and value businesses and what's a good deal and what's a not good deal. But oftentimes they're looking to build their bench and looking for operators. And that's what I was. And I had an opportunity with a couple of family offices and to do some projects while I was looking for whatever was next. I didn't go to get into the lumber or building materials supply space. It just happened like that. But I really, during that time, was kind of flying solo and really missed starting about 4 months, 6 months after I post sale. Really just, honestly, I was lonely. I missed being on a team. and quite honestly, probably starting to be a little depressed, and started doing a lot of self-reflection and looking back and what could I have changed? Those kind of questions, just like, why? And it ended up being, I call it my beautiful disaster, because it was lonely and it wasn't fun, but it made me get real about what mattered to me. And as I mentioned, I miss being on a team. I miss being needed. I miss being the man. And I knew that I wanted to do that. But if I was going to do that again, I needed to do things differently. And so just really started praying and thinking about things and talking with my wife and meeting with mentors. And honestly, just really felt like if the Lord ever blessed me with another business, that I would do it differently. And so that's kind of what's evolved into Walker Lumber, what we talked about in our strategies meeting today with the LBM community is, when they asked us to speak at that, the task that they gave us is, man, will you just tell people how you do what you do? And so I think it was John Wooden that said, your best lesson is your last mistake. And so I was able to take that mistake that I had made that led to my extreme burnout, that led to the sale, and say, okay, how are we going to transition and do this different? So one of the things I'm so proud of at Walker is the team we built. And that's kind of the impetus of what went forward and what we talked about today.
Yeah. So tell me about the story that led to you reaching out to your brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Obviously a talented, intelligent guy, got his law degree, working at Goldman Sachs. And you say, what about the lumber business? We could do this together.
Yeah, so
tell us about that story.
My brother-in-law and business partner is a lot smarter than me. He has his master's in tax law, and he worked for Goldman Sachs for 17 years. Or as they say in South Park, the Goldman Sachs. But anyway, Scott was kind of parallel and a kind of a different journey. He had the golden handcuffs, had a wonderful job, and was doing really well, but felt like he was making money for other people and was not appreciated. And that gets into something else that's really important now in our culture at Walker's. We try to make people feel valued, and he didn't feel valued. And so he's my brother-in-law. He's my best friend. And I've been married to his sister for 27 years. And he had just reached out after I sold my business and said, hey, I know you're going to do something else. If you find something, I would love to join you if there's space. So one day I called him and said, hey, man, this is about 3 years after we had that conversation. I think I'm going to buy this lumber company. You want to do it with me? And I'll keep it clean. But he said, man, I don't know anything about lumber. And I said, well, that's okay. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Was there any part of you that thought, love this guy, married to his sister, best friend, this could be the worst thing ever. This could ruin all of that if we went into business together? Or did you just know, I want to have my right-hand man, I'm going to do it different next time, and had no doubt about it?
I've always done things my way. And the sentiment that you just shared is what most people said, dude, don't go into business with family. And to me, I'm a straight up guy, and I call things like I see it. And Bradley, I'm going to just tell you, I would much rather go in business with a family person or someone that I love and trust than someone that I don't know. And here's where those situations go south. And I'll tell you about a conversation Scott and I had. It's when one person can lever another person, that's when people feel marginalized and taken advantage of. So Scott asked me, he said, well, man, okay, well, what would that look like? And I said, what do you mean what it would look like? And he said, well, if I were to join you, what kind of like ownership stake, would that look like? And I said, 50-50. And he said, are you serious? And I said, yeah, why would we do it any other way? I said, if I own 51%, all you are is a glorified employee. And so from the very beginning, we started off with fair. And when Scott and I decided to buy Walker Lumber together, we made a commitment to each other that we would always put the company first. And if we ever disagreed, no always wins. And so,
and why?
Because if I want to do something and he doesn't want to do something, I would rather be conservative than aggressive. But I can tell you this, Scott and I have been partners probably 7 years and 8 months. And most people think I'm lying when I tell you this. We have never had a crossword. Now, we have disagreed with each other, but we've always put the company first. That's really important to us. We're in this for the long term, and so we got to make good decisions. And, as I mentioned in our talk today, it's really important for us to think with our hearts, not just our heads, and to make the right decisions for the right reason.
Tell us about, so you guys acquire Walker. The previous owner says he's going to stick around. One of the guys on the stage, Russ, kind of leading the operations. He's going to stick around. You guys say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go work in the yard. 2 new owners, going to figure this out, go work in the yard. What was the reaction from your new employees / colleagues when the guy from Goldman Sachs and his brother-in-law, the 2 owners, are back there, stacking loads, loading trucks and riding forklifts?
Well, one of the things, actually, I'll start with the reaction of the previous owner. When we told him we were going to work in the yard, he called us dumb and dumber. But it was important for us to get to know our people and to earn their trust. And Scott and I, right, wrong, or indifferent, we didn't come from the lumber business, and we needed to learn the business. And one of the things that we liked about Walker Lumber was the business was a very good business prior to us buying it. What really attracted us and really made us want to buy the business is what we thought it could become. And we knew that if we were going to put systems and technology in place to make us more efficient and position us for growth, that we had to understand the business from the bottom up. And what better way to do that than to just get out in the yard and say, look, if I ever ask you to do something, I've done it. And so, when you're building a business and transitioning ownership, building trust is imperative, and it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you have to work on. You have to be up for the challenge of being misunderstood. You have to understand that you're going to be doubted. You have to understand that you're going to be talked about behind your back, but you have to be committed to doing the right thing. And we thought, let's get out in the yard and just show them from day one, we're going to work harder than anybody. And so that's what we did.
I wrote that quote down when you said on the stage, you said, as a leader, you have to be up for being misunderstood by the people that work with you. Why is that?
Well, whether you're an owner or leader, we like to refer to our management team as leadership team because there's a different connotation there.
Absolutely.
But when you go from being one of the guys, let's just take out being an owner. Let's talk being a leader. And you get tapped to be a leader and you've been one of the guys. Well, you automatically get put in a different segment by the people that you used to be one of the guys with. Like, can I trust this guy? Are you brown nosing? Okay, you think you're better than me. Okay, I can't tell this guy everything now. And it's the same thing with ownership. I mean, running a business, owning a business, leading a business, whatever role you're in, when you get put in that level of leadership or ownership, it's a lonely place sometimes. Most people don't understand that until they experience it. And because once you're in that position, you're not one of the guys anymore. And even though you want to be, and nothing may even change about yourself, but it's just how you're looked at. And people don't understand the burden that is real when you're an owner, when you're a good owner. And I'm not saying we're a good owner, but when you truly put the interest of your employees before yourself and are committed to that. Most people think, well, the owner just makes all the money. They have no idea about the debt you have to incur, the covenants that you have to make, and the commitments after hours that no one ever sees you burdening over, just wrestling with. So that's how I would describe that.
Yeah. You described Mr. Dave Reichert of Davis Hahn Lumber Company from the stage in front of him, by the way, which is, I know Dave and his wife, Darren, getting to know his children as well as they come into the business, I mean, brought a tear to my eye when you can see someone publicly express gratitude that way is incredibly meaningful. And you said, Dave, you're my hero. Why? What has he meant to you and your business and your family?
Well, Dave's just the real deal. I really am drawn to authentic people. Dave's different than me, but Dave's authentic, and he's always the same. And he's very committed in his faith. It's not something that he rubs in your face. He lives it out, and he's just principled, and he does things for the right reason. And so I knew Dave before he was in the lumber business, when we went to church together in Dallas, Texas, 25 years ago, when he was a lawyer. So we've kind of ended up in the same place. He owns a lumber company along Scott and I, my business partner, own a lumber company. We've known each other. And so there's another guy in Huntsville named Rob Wilson who's...
Oh, yeah. I know Rob.
Rob's very similar. If Rob was there today, I would have said the same thing about him. So, we're at the LBM Strategies meeting, and we're all here, to meet people, to network, and to hear people talk. And we were fortunate enough to be asked. And I just thought it was important to recognize two people who've had a tremendous influence on my business partner, Scott, and myself, because we're all beggars just trying to find food. Yeah. And, I think that Dave is always very open. So is Rob. I'm closer with Dave than I am Rob, but I met Rob through Dave. And it's so nice to just have a peer in the industry that you respect, that you can pick up the phone, call them, and ask them a real question. And, like I mentioned earlier, I remember calling Dave one day when I was frustrated about something, and he just leaned in and said, I've been there, man. But when you got to just ask yourself when you get in a situation like that is, how do you use the talents that the Lord has given you to bring honor and glory to him? And as a believer in this business, that is what it's all about. It's not about me. And usually when someone gets frustrated or irritated, oftentimes it goes back to something that's really their problem. And so when you can be reminded that this isn't my business, I'm just a steward, and how am I going to handle that? And that was the word I needed at that day, that I actually wrote down and remind myself of pretty much any time I get frustrated.
Well, I think it's a perfect segue to something that I literally texted my wife as you guys were talking about it. I said, and she works with me in the business, and she's, obviously my partner in multiple different ways. And I said, we got to figure out how we do more. And that was because of what you were talking about, and David Blair, about your second chance program. What is that? How did it get started? And why are you passionate about it?
Well, it's the thing I'm most proud of that Scott and I have implemented or accomplished at Walker. And, I think it's worth noting that we haven't arrived, man. We're still becoming what we want to be. And before I sold my first business, it was like I had to go to work. It was like I wanted these things. I wanted to build wealth, and I wanted things, my family to be comfortable. And so I had to go to work. And that's kind of what led to the burnout. And the different perspective based in gratitude that I've been able to experience in this Walker Lumber, it's not I have to go to work, it's I get to go to work.
Yeah.
And so when you get to go to work, it's a total paradigm shift of what's going on in your head. And you're looking for ways to encourage people and build culture and build family. And those are all things that we focus on a lot. And one day, honestly, Scott worked in the yard for about 6 months, and I worked in the yard for a year. And the only reason Scott worked 6 months is he's smarter than me, as I told you. And someone had to learn how to do the purchasing, and it wasn't going to be me. And so he went inside with the owner, who had agreed to stay on 1 year post-close so that he could learn how to do the purchasing. Well, I stayed in the yard, and then I became the yard manager. And after about a year, then we started implementing some systems to make us more efficient. So I was out there in the yard for about a year and a half, all in all, and we were experiencing a lot of growth. And Scott and I just felt like The Lord had given us a wonderful opportunity, and how could we be creative about giving back? And I don't know if you're familiar with the author Bob Goff. He has a book called Love Does, but it just talks about meeting people where they are and loving on them. And I'm a people person. I'm a gatherer. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Chariots of Fire, but there was a line in the movie that has always impacted me. And Eric Little, who's the main character in that book, says, when God made me, he made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. And I think that's the riddle we all have to figure out is, how did God make me? What did he give me that's unique to me? And how do I use that? So when God made me, Ray Hayles, he made me relational. And when I invest in other people, I feel his pleasure. Well, what an opportunity and platform that Scott and I have as being owners of Walker Lumber. And so just trying to get creative and figure out how we could give back. We thought, man, I had a customer, and he owns a couple of halfway houses. He's a recovering addict himself. He's been sober for over a decade. And we just got to talking one day, and he said, hey, if I have a guy that's working his steps and is showing promise, would you hire him? And I said, heck yeah, man. Like, send him. And that has opened the floodgates. That's how it started. But I'm going to tell you this, making money's fun. Competing is just awesome for me. I love that. But when you can impact a human being's life that changes their trajectory forever, there's no amount of money that you can place on that. So the inception of the Second Chance program started just like I mentioned, but then it just kind of grew into, hey man, we can restore hope and dignity into someone's life. Because, when people come out of prison or out of rehab and people see a lapse in employment, most people toss the resume into the trash. And when we meet people, and David Blair runs that program for us now, and he is a rock star. He's doing so much better than I ever did at it. But, when you can meet someone where they are, and their past when they come in, and they have this cloud of shame following them around, they kind of come in looking down, and you can say, hey man, I know all about your past, and I don't care. I don't ever want to talk about it again. I care about your future. And if you're willing to embrace what we're doing at Walker Lumber, we can create a pathway for you, not just to be a lumber loader your whole life. And David Blair is a perfect example. He started out on foot, hand loading lumber into people's trucks. He then moved to a forklift and became an order picker. He did so well there that we moved him over inventory. He did so well there, we moved him to inventory management. From inventory management, into the assistant yard manager. Then he moved into the yard manager. And as our business was growing, I needed to focus in other areas, and I needed to hand off the Second Chance program. And he was a guy that came through that and excelled. And so guess what? Now David leads that program. But where he's better than me is now when we get a person, he looks him in the eye the first day and says, hey, there's nothing you've ever done that I haven't done. And look, Walker Lumber is a great place. And if you want to embrace the culture that we're building here, we can provide a path for you. And if you don't, because we do have high standards, it won't work out for you. But if you're coming for a paycheck, you're going to hate it because it's hard. But if you want to be part of a family, it's great because it's real.
Yeah. That was just so powerful, and to hear kind of David talk about it. And he was telling a story, and I wrote it down. He just kind of said he had a relapse. And then he said, I just had so much guilt and so much shame. And I'm like, I think we've all experienced that to varying levels. But when you have, obviously you're going to have constraints around that and boundaries. But when you come and say, hey man, welcome you back. What can we do? And let's make the future bigger than the past. All of a sudden, this isn't paycheck territory. This is somebody else, like you said, can change my life. And that's kind of what really resonated with me. I'm watching the time here, and I appreciate you making time here. Maybe just build on that a little bit. Close with just another extremely powerful story where at the end of the story, the doctor comes in and says, I got to see the people who made this happen. Fill in the audience the story that led to the doctor coming in to talk to you about one of your employees.
Well, let me, if you don't mind, I'd like to close the loop on the David story.
Oh, yeah, please, go ahead.
Because we have a second chance program, not a third chance program. But it's important. David had no mother and no father. And when we get to know people in the second chance program, we're not just onboarding people, we're investing in them. No. And so we got to know David, okay? And he had nothing in his life. And so he had done a great job for 3 months. And when he relapsed, that shame that follows people in addiction around happened to him. So he went off the radar, wouldn't respond to my phone calls or anybody. No one knew where he was. So finally, as a last ditch effort, I just texted him and said, David, I just want you to know I love you and I care about you. I know you don't want to talk. I just need to know you're okay. Oh. So he immediately responded back. Again, he didn't want to talk because of the shame. But when I reached out to him and told him that I loved him, he texted me and said, I'm okay. And I said, well, I would love for you to come back in and talk to you about what it would look like for you to get your job back. So when he came back in, we gave him a hug and we prayed for him. And we said, hey, look, we don't give third chances. So we're going to have to let you go today because that's the rules. However, if you go back to rehab and agree to taking a drug test once a week for a period of time, we'd be happy for you to come back. And that was what brought him back. And the rest is just it's the biggest success story of Walker Lumber is David Blair.
Well, I appreciate you stopping me from trying to power through that and put that book end to it, because that's powerful.
All right. So what happened is another thing that people don't know how much insurance costs. We have 82 people is an astronomical figure. Okay. But it's something we feel very important about. Again, if we're going to be good stewards of our business, one of the things that we want to do is provide insurance, not for people who want it, but for everybody. Okay. And so we pay, I think, somewhere between 90 and 95% of a very good insurance program. And what has just happened over the years is when someone that doesn't understand insurance that works for us gets strep throat, maybe they didn't have a mom and dad, they don't understand how insurance works, they're uneducated in that point, gets strep throat and is scared that they're going to not be excused from work for whatever reason, even though that's not the case with us. They go to the emergency room in many cases. And they go and the doctor sees them and 10 minutes later gives them a prescription for penicillin or for whatever it is. And then they come home and they got a $1,500 emergency room bill. And so we have an unbelievable lady who runs our human resources department named Hannah Johnson. And Hannah is more like a social worker than just an HR lady that distributes insurance. She is invested. And she knows our people. I mean, literally, she's like a social worker / counselor. We encourage everybody, hey, if you don't want to talk to me or Scott and you got something you need to talk about, go talk to Hannah. And people do. Every day you see people going in their office to talk and they'll pour their hearts out to her. Well, at the end of last year, knowing that we had a problem with people understanding insurance and the financial commitment that we have always been up for, we went to Hannah and said, hey, look, we need you to sit down with everybody at Walker Lumber and make sure they understand insurance and the importance of having a primary care doctor so that when you do get strep throat or cut your finger or whatever, that you can call your doctor and go to the doctor and you have a $50 copay or whatever the copay is and you get help. You don't have to go to the emergency room. And so we need people to understand that they get a free physical once a year under our insurance program and that they can go to the dentist twice a year and get their teeth cleaned for free. And we need you to explain that to them and make sure loud and clear that however long it takes, they understand this. So that happened at the end of last year. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a gentleman that was out for a while, and I won't say his name right now for purposes.
For HIPAA laws, I think it's probably the safe.
Let's just call him. Sure. Let's just call him John.
Okay, perfect.
Let me just work it in on the back way. So Hannah was walking through the store and I said, "How's John doing?" And she said, "Actually, a gentleman walked up and interrupted our conversation. He said, 'Hey, I'm John's doctor. Could you put me in touch with the owner?' And I said, 'Well, I'm one of the owners.' And he said, 'Well, look, I want to tell you something. I had to come meet you.' And I said, 'Okay.' And he said, 'So you saved John's life.' And I said, 'Well, okay.' And he said, he told me all about how y'all sat down at the end of last year and explained the insurance program to him. And because y'all did that, he got a physical. And when he got a physical, his blood work came back and raised some flags. And as we investigated further, he had cancer. And when we did the ultrasound, we saw also a tumor. And so he had to have his kidney removed and a tumor that was larger than his kidney. But he said, I wanted to come by here today and tell you, you changed someone's life. If he had waited 6 more months, we wouldn't be talking today. And so Hannah gets the credit for that, and just how she lovingly and tenderly and patiently, if you can imagine sitting down with 80 employees to tell them about insurance, how laborious and boring that would be. But
Right.
Look, one person's life was changed. And there's a story I love, and we can close with this or keep going, but I heard it one time. This guy was on the seashore, and there were just millions of starfish that had been washed up on the ocean. And this old man was out there, and he was throwing them back in the ocean. And this little boy saw him from far off and just started walking toward him. And when he finally got up to him, he said, "Man, what are you doing?" And the old man looked at him. He said, "I'm throwing them back." And he said, "Do you really think you're going to make a difference?" And he said he reached down and grabbed another one and threw it back in the ocean. He said, "You think it'll make a difference for that one?" And Bradley, I think sometimes we think we want to change the world all at once. And what we've got to do is do it one day, one person at a time.
I have absolutely no way to end this podcast better than to say, this has been inspirational. You've been extremely humble. And I know you keep saying it's like, hey, we're not perfect. We're a work in progress. What I will say is there's a reason you guys are on the stage. You guys are doing great work. And I feel lucky to be there and have listened to it, and appreciate your time here. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Look forward to doing it again sometime.
All right, friend, how did that go? I didn't oversell it, did I? Ray Hayles is very impressive. I would strongly recommend you follow him and his company on Instagram. You can just look up Walker Lumber and Supply, and then it's Ray Hayles, Hayles. He's a real good follow. Also, he is a people person. Connect with him on LinkedIn. Follow him on LinkedIn. He posts stuff a lot, and I don't go in there every single day, but when I do venture into LinkedIn, his posts are one that I follow. He makes book recommendations that I have followed and have found a lot of value in. And he just helps you think a little bit differently or more intentionally about what you're doing, the business you're running, and serving your team and your customers better. So I'll leave it at that. Now, if you found value in this episode, there's something small that you can do. You can leave us a review. That means more to us than you know. You can just go to any podcast player, give us a review, make a note. We read every single one of them. And our goal is to continue to improve and deliver more value. And I am certainly thankful for your attention, energy, and focus that comes because I know you could be applying that elsewhere. So hopefully you're getting a lot from this. All right. I think that's it. I've got nothing more. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.